So, dear Chairman, welcome you all. Because we are a little behind of our program, so I would like to directly get into the issue in this panel and in this session. We are going to be talking and discussing about the especially the pipe manufacturers and their problems, and we are going to have a general overview about the industry. So I'd like to direct my first question to Kemal Bey. So you're one of the most important companies involved in the steel industry. Of course, we have already been passing through a very problematic process and the period. And you are the chairman of the Association of the Steel Pipe, and we would like to hear from you the situation that the pipe producers are in. So especially the shock of foreign currency, and and the other issues which also play some obstacle in front of us. Like United States, so we know that the point which the producers came to in the steel industry. So together with that, and there is another thing that I'm a little bit curious about, because especially steel pipe line producers, how would you evaluate the situation, current situation? Thank you. Firstly, I would like to extend my special thanks to the Steel Office for organizing such a beautiful and very valuable organization like this. So, galvanized sector. So, he said. He said that you are going into a very bad direction as the galvanized industry. So I haven't prepared any presentation. So I'm just going to read partly, and then I'm going to recite the other parts. So steel pipe sector has got the capacity of 7 million tons and around 5 million tons of production in the steel pipe, and we are the biggest producer of the steel pipe in Europe. So we've got 35 pipe manufacturers, and around 45 and 35% are exported to the other countries. Last year we have produced around 4.5 million tons, and 1.9 million tons were exported. So we've got data regarding to the September. So around 1.6 million ton export we will be exporting. So the shrink which occurs in the domestic market and the other measures have had a great impact on our industry, and around 15% decline has been achieved in our export, and 219 the shrink which occurs in the domestic market carries out, you see. So this shrinkage has got a negative impact on our industry, and our production has got a decline at a rate of 12%. So as I've told you before, we see this decline very clearly in our industry. So up until 3 years ago, the most important export destination was the United States, and the custom tax increase up to 50, then drop down to 25 again. Of course, this had a great negative impact on our export regime and policy. On the other hand, the quota which has been imposed by the European has got a very negative impact on our export as well. In the past year, they applied a quota for 6 months, and the last July and until the July 2020, there is another quota application, and so the quotas are all going to be filled till January. So we are not going to have an opportunity to export our manufactured products to those countries until next July. Of course, Iraq was also a very important market, export market for Turkey as well. And there is a tax which goes up to $80 and $90 million. That also impacted us very negatively. I've got a question, but I'm going to ask this in the second run. And Gökhan Bey, now I would like to continue with you, and I would like to ask a question from the same point of view. As a flat steel representative, as the members of YISAD, more than 1 year, of course, after the shock of the foreign currency rates and shrinking of the domestic demand, and when we take the other problems that we have already experienced so far into our consideration during this period, especially the institution which are the members of YISAD, in terms of steel trade, what do you say about the stock management system and the so do you think that, or can you qualify that this period was the toughest period that the industry has just experienced? So thank you very much for the organization of this meeting and the sponsoring companies as well. So the generation at the age of 45, 50 years old, of course, we have already eyewitnessed the similar changes in the past years as well. So when all the subjects come and coincide one after another on top of the other, of course, so a lot of figures have already been touched upon, but there are some critical points in order to create the awareness into the year 2017 and 2018. I am only talking about the flat steel. So we have got an increase in the production of flat steel around 900,000 steel. So we have had the production increase around 900,000 tons. So in the productions of the flat steel, there are no very sharp dismorality, you see. We are not that pessimistic. So, for example, the monthly average of 2018 and 2019 are more or less the same. The other important point that I would like to draw your attention to, especially on the basis of monthly basis, in order to make it more clear. So, the black import was about 366,000 tons. Everybody is talking about the recession in the business, and so we are at the same level. So it's $368,000. And the cold one, the monthly average was in the past year was 64,000, and this year 74,000 tons. So, and the import in 2018. On the annual base, in the first 9 months of 2019, we haven't had a great change in the production. So, the quoted one, there is an increase as well. So let's go back to and talk about the export. The average average export is about 300,000 6, and this year was about 288,000. So we are talking about around 45,000 tons less export. For example, in the cold one, there is a little increase from 41,000 to 45,000 tons. And so the question that you have already asked, have you interpreted in Kayseri? So, and maybe I can give you another data regarding the consumption. 17 million tons, and the cold, there was a drastic drop and decline in the last year. In the first 9 months, the data we have already had takes back to the figures that we had in the year 2018. So we are going to be having more or less the same figures. The section which completes the question. So how you are going to be adapting yourself to the changing environment and conditions, and what will happen in the future in our industry. So there is a kind of decrease in the interest rate, and a stock cost has been realized as being one of the most important issues to be taken by the companies. And in Turkey, a few minutes ago, as Typhoon Bay said that he has prepared 3 different presentations and he didn't know which one to talk about. So the industrialist has just noticed that there are some political issues which might have an impact on the manufacturing of the steel goods as well. And this, so with the advantage of with the varying of these issues, I believe that the industry is going to be developed. So the most important issue over here that attracted me is that the import rate is going up. So, I mean, in my opinion, import shouldn't increase. I don't know why it increases, you see. I believe that it is a subject which should be discussed about in relatively more serious meetings. So, well, excuse my language, but I believe that this issue should be put into the table in an environment to which many important managers of the companies are gathered. You see, well, from my point of view, I believe that this much import should not be done by Turkey. So Namık Bey, so you were the chairman of the steel exporters for 2 terms, and you have undertaken the responsibility Steel Foreign Trade Association. So would you please be kind enough as to give me what was the reason to establish such an association in Turkey? Firstly, I would like to extend my thanks to Steel Orbis for creating such an atmosphere in which all the sector players come together and exchange their ideas regarding the industry. So as I see Cholakol almost everywhere in this room, so I believe that they have already made the economical leap. So when we talk about the association, you know that association literally means organization which collects and convene all the members of the industry. And it's an inevitable part of the industry. When we look at the situation and status of association, of course, before 1990, but as of 1990 in Turkey, there were about more than 1,000 associations established in Turkey, and so we know that there are some associations like the lovers of the birds. So they are undertaking some responsibilities for Izmir, Antalya, and Ankara. We've got the association. So, I mean, association and establishing association is an important issue, even to be talked internally as well. So association is an organization which tries to empower the members of the industry that is involved in. And when we look at our association's vision and missions, so we would like to the triggering power and impulsive power and help the expansion of the Turkish steel industry and contribute the improvement and progress of the industry as well. I'm taking the principles of the trade into consideration as well and take an active role in order to reinforce the rules and principles applied in the industry and add some organize some activities which are going to be adding up an added value to players and it should be also disseminated among the industry members as well. I mean, governors regulating standards should be formed as well, especially should be an information center for the steel industry and also guiding especially for the players of the industry as well. As an association, our vision and mission in order to be successful so we are aware of showing an extraordinary performance in order to reach our goals. The manufacturers, exporters, importers of our industry, and the tradesmen, domestic tradesmen, insurance brokers, researchers, and together with the professionals, and at the same time, the bosses. So it is a roof organization. So we have already had around 120 members in our associations, and according to us, this number of members is really very good. So I believe that this is a really great achievement that we have already realized. I mean, from the point of structure, we've got 13 management members of directors, and we've got some inspection team as well, and other members of our association, whenever they wish to, they can bring the subjects into our evaluation, provided that they can get the permission from the board of directors. They've got the opportunity to attend to the meeting. So this is not a closed box, you see. So we are just trying to contribute value add to our industry as well. I mean, the ones who would like to add power to our power, of course, there are ways to join us. So these are the things that I would like to say up to now. So in the second round, I'm going to come back to you, Kemal Bey. You have already mentioned about, especially in the side of export, so the taxes which has been imposed in America, United States, and Canada. So even the Gulf countries are looking forward to put some impose in the products that they import, you see. And this has been mentioned a lot during this meeting as well. In our country, the capacity of production of hot-rolled steel. So I think this has just struck the possibility of your so so the taxes have already been regulated in the beginning of this year as well. I mean, when you evaluate these year from the point of domestic market and the international market, what would you say about them? I mean, from the point of our industry, we've got a really very interesting point. And there is no tax in the production of the product. But when you export or import it, a tax has been imposed in the imported goods. So for us, raw material and the products are really more important to reach and have an access to. So Turkey, the steel industry has been just protected for a very long time. So there are 2.5 and in pipe 9% tax, and as of the last year for steel pipe there is 6% tax. So the steel industry in Turkey is an industry which has been protected by the government as well. And the productions of the flat steel, there is an increase. That's true. So 4 million tons of the flat steel are exported, and there are a deficit at the rate of 4 million tons in the industry as well. So we've got not only the steel pipe producers are involved in this one, but there is some automotive industry players, and there are some no-names industrialists, especially in the Anatolian part of the country as well, maybe 1,000 or 10,000 of producers were. So, I mean, the flat steel is an important issue for them as well. That's why I believe that this flat steel should be imported as well. In order to have an access to the product, I mean, if you protect the industry this much, then it would be very difficult for them, especially to improve themselves. And not to be able to produce a different kind of products, steel products here is also another issue. And in the year 2016, some of the companies which open up their offices in the foreign countries, the price has increased at a rate of $100. For example, the companies have been went under interrogation. I think if you look at back at this April and the May month of the year 2019. So we are struggling with the protectionism in every part of the world as well, ranging from Canada and Morocco to Morocco as well. So there is a kind of protectionism almost everywhere in the world. So especially in the subject of taking some measures to fight with, of course, but this is something to do with the European Union, because European Union is the biggest market, especially in the side of steel market, and they impose a quota as well. So there could be a protection might be possible to apply. A quota, for example, might be imposed. So light and automobile are all sold over here, and the most export are generally made from Turkey to the European countries. So the iron and steel industry, and in relation to the pipe industry, has got a parallel development with each other. So no growth has already been foreseen in the world at the moment. Thank you. Bitti zaten. Bitti zaten. Şimdi alabilirsin.
Belli vergiler var sizin de söylediğiniz.
Of course, as you've mentioned, there are certain taxes, and you're right in what you're saying. So, Gökhan Bey, let us continue with you. I would like to hear about your expectations and estimates. You are a board member in YISAD, and you're one of the few people that keep close track of the steel market. In the recent day, could you give us a quick rundown of the policies and measures applied to mitigate the effects of the troublesome times that are ahead? And do you think that these are working? And how do you think that the market will be? And what should be done for the good of the industry, do you think? Thank you. I would like to start by talking about something that was mentioned by the end of the first section. We've founded an association with some of our colleagues about some years ago, and 3 years ago we went to Ankara. And as a principle, we believe that exports should be present in the trade of any country, but not to this extent. Especially in the hot-rodded steel products group, Turkey and Turkey's production is not enough, and in the following years, in some areas, there is a potential need for other production mills. I am not against imports, but I do think that the extent that Turkey is importing within the framework of free trade is excessive. Currently, regardless of the current price levels, I believe that we are living through the worst days, and we're looking into what could be lying underneath this situation. As you've mentioned, there are serious steps being taken in favor of Turkey. Interest rates have been decreased. So especially for companies that want to invest, there are very attractive Turkish lira rates, exchange rates available. But are these enough? I think not, because the industry workers and the investors in Turkey, their number one priority is not the interests, it is the FX rate. And I am saying this very clearly and precisely. In the following years, the FX rates will not see any volatile fluctuations. And the people who believe that are going to be the ones who invest. So if there is a motivation towards new investments in the industry, I believe that we will see some movement there. And we will need to anticipate the demand volumes in the following quarters. So with the news that with any news that Turkey is going to increase or decrease its exports volume, the prices follow suit by increasing or decreasing. And additionally, the Turkish market is one of the markets that global players keep close track of. And the slightest change in the FX rate is being closely watched by almost all of the large players in the global market. And in terms of demands, I don't expect a very large growth, but if Turkey reaches the figures that it has reached this year, and in other steel products like HRC or flat steel or other products that we mentioned, in that case, I wouldn't expect a demand that is worse than what we have today. Thank you. Thank you, Gökhan Bey. Hopefully, this is the worst. And let me correct one thing. I wonder if we think like that because we believe what I've said, or we believe that because we think like that. But regardless, I do believe that this is the worst that we'll ever see. Yes, sometimes. Uh, are there anybody among you that doesn't check Twitter the first thing in the morning? That is what I do as soon as I wake up. Again, thank you. In this period where our exports are affected so greatly by external factors, you have been working on such a project in this environment, and we had the opportunity to listen to what you've been doing in your project. And Mr. Mustafa has given a presentation and explained to us that the pilots were chosen and the project is on foot. And what I'm asking of you is that could you please share with us the current goals of the projects? Now, let me first start to get into the philosophic aspect of the things. As an NGO, instead of asking everything from the state, we should be able to achieve a state where we only need the help of the government in the rare crucial event, because you can't expect the state to cover everything for you, because you can't predict what the state will do next. So you need to be able to create projects and move forward with them. And this project is one that we've designed ourselves, and we are conducting it in collaboration with steel manufacturers. It will be an international company, but at the same time, it will be inherently Turkish. And to that end, we called it Heybe Line. Heybe is a Turkish word, and line is the line you know from the industry. Now, of course, this isn't the end of it. In Turkey and Turkey's export docks, Northern Africa countries are first designated pilot countries. It will be about what goods that we send over there. We have goods that we are not able to send over there. These are materials that weigh about 300 to 500 tons. And what we're trying to do is to gather these materials and make them, gather these materials and deliver them to these pilot designated companies. This will give us a competitive edge. And as you know, the state has issued benefits for that, but that didn't benefit the exporters very much. It was about $120 to $150 per container. That was the transport cost at the time. And thanks to our research and the project that we've conducted, we estimate that we will be able to bring it down to $45 to $50 per container. So, of course, that the project itself is something that is in progress, and it will need a certain amount of money to be able to develop. But what we're also working on is storage. As you all know, across every product, the storage rates are quite high. But when you say from the warehouse, on the daily, our exporter colleagues will be able to profit more. And what we're doing will move forward in collaboration with international insurance companies like Hermes. We will work in close collaboration with these companies and try to minimize or even eliminate the risk completely. But also, we know that people won't be as likely in the beginning to transport their goods to an unknown country and store them there. And to that end, we have created a task force within our colleagues, and they will travel to these docks and they will inspect those docks and make agreements with the people over there, with the warehouse owners, and with agencies. And if needed, besides the exporters there, and the importance, besides the importers there, they will establish contact with the exporters there and work with them. On the other side, legally, the company will be established by the end of this month. Now, when we reduce our costs in two areas, we will be able to profit more and we will have the opportunity to transport more goods over there. Now, about the situation over there, they have about 365,000 tons of steel that went over there, and there is a huge margin that we can utilize. The goods that are transported over there do not demand a lot of technology. They are not highly technological goods. That is because the countries there are not as developed as Turkey, and what they need is mostly materials that are to be consumed. And their GDP per capita is about $4,500. It might increase to 7,000 or so in some countries, but that's the general figures. And they are developing at the same time. But this development we can keep track of. And as we're doing this, through our association, we have created an organization. This is not part of the association, but we have this rule in our company. You can own a maximum of 1% of shares, and these shares will be distributed to, at minimum, 100 people. So this way, it will be in accordance with the international structures and enterprises, and it will be completed by the end of this month. Once we're done with our pilot regions, we will move to the southern sides of Africa or the Caribbean region and the Gulf countries, as well as Far Eastern countries. We have projects that we're developing for these regions as well. And this is mainly about iron and steel, but at the same time, when we examine their imports, we see that a majority of them are buying cement, as well as pasta and flour. These things make up a large large share of their imports. So we've talked to the relevant ministries and the NGOs and exporter assemblies, and in the spirit of not taking excessive risks, we are not making haste, but nonetheless we are trying to move quickly. And that is the gist of what I would have liked to say, and I'm quickly checking that if I've skipped anything or missed any points. No, I have not. Thank you. Thank you. I hope the state adopts it, and yes, it will adopt it. Thank you. Uh, do we have any questions from the audience for the chairman? Yes, Ms. Asuman first. Something I'm curious about. I was in a meeting in the Chamber of Commerce yesterday, and a similar thing was discussed. That's what I'm trying to understand. If we're the cheapest country in the world in terms of steel, why aren't our exports booming? And why am I not exporting more, and why am I importing if I have the cheapest prices, the fastest service? That's what I'm struggling to understand. And another thing is, and I'm talking about cold-rodded products. The consumers need to make new investments time and again. But what the consumers are considering when they're making their choices are not mainly the prices. What they're considering is the quality and the speed of service. So what I'm asking you is to examine this phenomenon because I'm really struggling to understand how we can have the cheapest prices but still have a huge import. So we need to keep close track of the processes, because there are reasons besides the price. And I believe that these are problems that could be solved So I believe that we need to focus on what we're talking about and put our money where our mouth is, basically. Now, as our colleagues mentioned before, I think that imports aren't something that we should be scared about. What we should be worried about is the obstacles between free trade or unfair imports. Now, we need to act dynamically and either go through structural changes or consolidate our methodology or our enterprises. Our people are strangely afraid of consolidation. I don't know why. Now, what company did we talk about? Volkswagen. It had a merger. So everybody is doing mergers. I don't quite understand why we are so afraid of mergers and consolidation. So we have this idea of sole ownership, which makes me think that the underlying purpose is not to make money, but to satisfy our own selfish egos. So we need to break some of our bad habits. And I believe that for some of us that are of a certain age, these problems are problems that are somewhat hard to overcome, and it will take some time. But what we should do is to look into ourselves when we're searching for mistakes and errors. Now, we have one question from Mehmet Bey. I have two questions for Kemal Bey and one for Gökhan Bey. Now, my question for Kemal Bey. We've been hearing all about excessive capacity, constant investments, capacity increases, and many manufacturers. But can you accept that as a manufacturer? Can you say that capacity increase should be controlled? And we should have the state saying, if you want to manufacture something, you need to have a solid reasoning for it and valid reasons before you can able to produce anything. Because in a sense, we are our own competitors. So can we develop a method where we could distribute the quota among ourselves? And because currently we are trying to make profit at the expense of exceeding our quotas, because this is something that Russia has been doing for many years in their dealings with the EU. I believe that this would make things easier for you. That's what I want you to confirm. And Gökhan Bey has said that he believes that imports should decrease. But I believe what we should consider is not how to decrease imports, but how to utilize the materials that are imported. Perhaps through bilateral cooperations or agreements, we could make it so that we increase our capacity of utilization, because I don't believe that decreasing imports will serve any beneficial, meaningful purpose, because this isn't just about dumping. Thank you. Okay, first of all, I would like to answer his question about the state and the planning. As you know, there are no there are no special benefits in the steel industry by the state, and the state doesn't perform any planning for no industry whatsoever. But I believe that this problem will be solved without the need for state intervention. At the end of the day, the problems will be reflected onto the companies, and those who are able to move on will, and those who won't be able to. And the problem will somewhat solve itself. And you might remember in the past, I believe it was the Ministry of Economy, they used to measure the performances of companies and apply quotas that are tailored to the companies. Now, I believe your purpose in what you're saying is to prevent the depreciation of prices resulting from fluctuations in the European market. But Turkey's competitors are not just in Europe, they are in all of the world, and I'm not in the favor of state intervention. I believe that whatever problems we have should be solved in the environment of free trade. Now, being against imports or not being against imports, it's a very thin line to walk. Now, there are certain reasons, and what I think about this is that there are people in Turkey that have opinions about a lot of industries or topics. I believe that these people should examine the issue from their own perspective. As you all know, 5 or 6 years ago, there was a free trade agreement signed in an Asian country, and they incrementally decreased their tariffs. And after a while, the taxes will be abolished. And I believe that there is a free trade agreement on the horizon. Besides that, we also have close to our borders, Iran. And we shouldn't just think about the issue as an issue of imports, because if you look at the big picture, when we lift taxes with some countries, we won't be able to know which companies, which manufacturers or transporting companies will be able to survive. So instead of looking out for the interests of one company or a group of companies, we need to be looking out for the interests of Turkey as a country in general. And we should also consider Turkey's needs in terms of import and export. But unfortunately, our black import prices are about $30 to $40 below the domestic price. So the questions that come, such as why do we have such high imports? And I believe the solution to all of these questions is that we need to be able to cooperate as NGOs or various companies. We shouldn't waste our companies' resources. But at the moment, Turkey's imports are much higher than its exports. And we are struggling to reverse this situation. And we are trying to export to many companies, and this is not just us, but many different companies, whether small or large. But there are a lot of mistakes and errors being made on the way. You shouldn't be redundant in your transportation, and you should be able to communicate clearly with your colleagues and or your competitors. And if we're able to achieve that, I believe that it will be beneficial not just to the companies, but Turkey as a whole in terms of the efficient use of our resources. So if you'll allow me, since we're quite low on time, I would like to close this panel, and I would like to extend my